South Korea begins its 5-day Chuseok holiday on Wednesday, where traditionally people travel back to their hometowns to spend their Thanksgiving period with their families. But the age-old harvest celebration won't see the usual large gatherings full of food, games and traditional rituals. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, South Koreans have been advised against travel and big family gatherings during the holiday in fear of infection cases peaking yet again. While 3 out of 4 Koreans say they won't be travelling during the holiday period, hundreds and thousands are expected to flock to popular tourist destinations, fueling concerns that this could trigger another wave of infections. To discuss the government's precautionary measures and what more needs to be done, especially ahead of the flu season, we connect with Dr. David Tizard, Professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University. It's good to have you join us, Dr. Tizard.
Good morning.
We also connect with Dr. Kwon Sun-man, Professor and former Dean of Public Health at Seoul National University. It's lovely to see you again.
Good morning.
Well, let's start with you, Dr. Tizard. So the government has been taking measures. They've placed a special quarantine measure over this Chuseok period. But in addition to encouraging people not to travel over the holidays, of course, the government's done what it can do to really stop church gatherings and group activities. And it's even warned people who are planning to join protests that legal action will be taken. But as you've recently pointed out in one of your articles, the most popular resorts in the country's holiday spots are nearly fully booked. I mean, this is all a bit confusing. I mean, what's the danger here?
Well, it's very confusing. If we just take your previous statistic that 3 in 4 South Koreans have no travel plans, there was an article out this week which was surveying just over 800 Seoul residents. Now, 75% of them said they had no travel plans. But that doesn't really tie in with the statistics that say in Busan, in Jeju, in Gangwon-do, all the popular travel locations, the luxury hotels, all the accommodation are almost fully booked. The Jeju Tourism Organization has said that it expects anywhere between 200 and 300,000 visitors during the Chuseok holidays. So something is not matching up here. It would seem that most people, or many people, intend to travel. And these are not just people with political allegiances or churchgoers or political fringe groups. These are just ordinary South Koreans that are looking to get away, despite the government placing this special quarantine period from Wednesday 30th until Sunday, October the 4th. Even Kim Kang-lip, the spokesperson for the Department and Safety Measure, he said the public should refrain from traveling. But it doesn't seem that the public are going to refrain. Everywhere's fully booked.
Exactly. And while the government, of course, is preparing and bracing itself to handle the sudden influx of people in these popular tourist areas. And Dr. Kwon, what kind of special measures do you think should be in place in these holiday spots?
Well, I think that we should remember what is the most basic and fundamental way to respond to this COVID-19 crisis. I think it is personal hygiene and social distancing. So wearing a mask and keep physical distancing and try our best to avoid group gatherings. But in a sense, this is a human nature. So we understand that most people, I think the majority of Koreans, comply with the guidelines and government recommendations. And many of us even sacrifice visiting, decide not to visit our parents. But even a small proportion, say like 5% of Koreans, do not comply with it. But in terms of number, it can be significant. And this Chuseok period can be a critical moment, critical time for those COVID-19 government policy, because as we all know, when people move, when people travel, the likelihood or probability of infection is increasing. So, and especially during the Chuseok period, when you visit our parents, the parents, our old people, are quite vulnerable population. So we should do our best to not to visit our parents, but at the same time, that does not mean that we can enjoy our holiday during this time period. So the basic message is that we should refrain from traveling. But some people, cannot avoid then in that case, the basic or fundamental thing is that the social distancing, personal hygiene, and wearing face mask.
So really to just keep some common sense, I suppose, during this holiday. And well, Dr. Tizard, so in what public health officials are so worried about is that infection cases, they really spiked after the holidays we had in May and also Liberation Day on August 15th. And well, while South Korea's never really had a rigorous lockdown before, do you think this self-regulation policy is working, or do you think this high level of social compliance that South Korea has been lauded for is turning into complacency?
I think we need to, as you say, acknowledge South Korea's excellent response thus far to the COVID-19 pandemic. Relative to other countries, it's maintained excellent health standards. It's had very few deaths relative to other countries, and also protected its economy to a certain degree. That's not to say that it's been perfect, however, and it could be better. Rather than complacency, I think human nature is there and people do want to get away. What I feel is that there needs to be a stronger sense of communication from the top down to the public. We've had the Seoul Metropolitan Government coming out with statements saying that people shouldn't travel, other branches of the administration saying that, but there's nothing really coming from the top. The government has said that it's going to reintroduce tolls on the highway, which have been absent since 2017. And they've said this is their measure that's going to prevent people from traveling. We're not really sure that just making people pay a few extra thousand won on the roads is going to really stop it. And we've also seen rather cutely in some of the local villages, elderly people put up signs saying they don't want their children to come home. But without a direct and strong message, I think people are still going to travel, they're still going to do this, and they'll be able to turn around and say, well, we were requested not to travel, but there was no law or there was nothing stopping us from doing so.
And Dr. Kwon, how do you see this? How do you see South Korea's current level of social compliance? I mean, a lot of young people are getting blamed for going out and trying to get on with their daily lives. And well, it's you know, we can sympathise with them, but at the same time, of course, there is a certain level of anger towards them as well. I mean, how should we really feel about this?
Yeah, I think it is a very painful balance and very difficult balance between our economy and daily life and this the disease control policy. As you know, that the complete lockdown is not possible and is not desirable in a democratic society. So we should rely on the people's behavior, but we should also accept the reality that human being as a socio-economic entity, because people want to meet people. People want to communicate, people want to gather together. And at the same time, our economy, especially Korean economy, is heavily depending on a small size firms and a large number of self-employed. So large number of self-employed are quite vulnerable economically, vulnerable population for demand shocks and government restrictions on social distancing. So I think I understand the government position. And I think we should go this way, because we should not say that the control of pandemic COVID-19 is the most important thing. We should not say that, because that is one of our goals. Because at the same time, we should save our economy and we should keep the morals and the mental health of our population. I mean, younger people, I mean, we should advise them to keep social distancing and avoid gatherings. But to some extent, we cannot expect a very high level of distancing from the population of Korea. The government should understand this reality. And when you design policy, we should take into account the potential trade-off of different alternatives.
And Dr. Tizard, really at this time, the messages that we get from the government are so important. But of course, all over the world, we're really struggling with this. You know, government leaders, they want lockdowns, then they say, let's not do lockdowns. And it's all very confusing for the public. And well, we really do need that leadership. Do you think this is something that South Koreans are getting at the moment?
They are certainly getting it in the form of Jong Eun-kyung. There's been a lot of good messaging coming from the government, and that should be applauded. In terms of human nature, we're political animals, we're economic animals, as Dr. Kwon says. This is all well and true, but we want to return to normalcy as soon as possible. There is this Korean expression that you build the fence after the cow has already run away. I just hope that after Chuseok, we don't experience another spike that could have been prevented. Now, good leaders make decisions that are unpopular but beneficial in the long term. Any government that tries to strongly urge the public not to do that is not going to receive a great deal of political support. And so I would just hope that the governments here, they don't favor political expediency or support, but rather they look at the long-term interests of the public health and try to get us back as soon as possible. And that would happen through direct communication with the public. We've seen statistics come out recently that the current president, President Moon, he's given very few press conferences. And I think it would be very interesting to ask the president these days, should we travel in unambiguous, in non-vague terms? What should I do? What should we do as families? What should we do during this Chuseok, Mr. President? And if it comes from the horse's mouth, then you have a clear and unambiguous answer.
Right, and we've seen leaders of New Zealand or even Scotland, for instance, giving very strong public messaging, and I think it's really helped. And well, Dr. Kwon, how do you think authorities and members of the public should prepare against this virus, especially as we're entering now into the colder flu rampant season?
Yeah, as we all know, the Chuseok will be a critical moment, and then also we are becoming, the winter is coming, and this is a flu season. So I think, but still, I think that we still need a on and off strategy, because we cannot keep a very strong level of social distancing. I'm not talking about just politics, but it may have a devastating effect on the self-employed and small business, and also there are many vulnerable population, like people, old people, and people with existing conditions. So I think that, as government mentioned, that vaccination or flu shot is very important. But unfortunately, there's some reports about the mismanagement of some supply chain issues. But I think that the general public doesn't have to be panicked, because although there's some exposure, but overall, so far, according to the report, so far there is no real damage to the quality of the vaccines. So I think that the old population, people with existing disease, should take this flu shot. But at the same time, I'm a bit worried also about the mental health of as a result of this COVID-19, because there's the increasing restrictions of this COVID-19 policy. It may have a serious negative impact on the mental health of the population, and the increasing number of people will suffer from some stress as a result of these restrictions.
That's very true, Professor. I mean, we really should remember those who are particularly vulnerable, not only to contracting the virus, but other conditions that they're dealing with, whether it's in health or their socio-economic circumstances. And well, Dr. Tizard, before you go, your thoughts on how we should remember members of society whose livelihoods really are hanging on these social distancing measures that are, well, always subject to change. How should we really protect these people?
Dr. Kwon makes a very important point that we should keep in mind. Yes, that economically and in terms of mental health, there are people in South Korean society that are suffering as a result of COVID-19 and that were suffering before the COVID-19 pandemic came out. We need to keep them in our minds in terms of the government's legislation, in terms of how we reach out and communicate with people. There's been more attention in the media on mental health issues, and I'm pleased to see that that's taking place. We can do this with our digital technology. South Korea is the most wired and internet-connected society in the world. Pick up your phone, pick up the computer, and reach out and touch people digitally. I think that will mean a lot going forward.
Well, this is where we'll have to wrap up the discussion, I'm afraid. But that was Dr. Kwon Sun-man, Professor and former Dean of Public Health at Seoul National University, and Dr. David Tizard, Professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University. Thank you both so much for your incredible insights.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. We have the Chuseok holiday in Korea starting tomorrow, so we'll be back after the weekend on Monday, Korea time. Hope you join us then, and please do stay safe in the meantime. Have a wonderful week wherever you are. Goodbye.